Welcome to the Bible Forum. It is Sunday night, September 30th, 2018. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 Eastern. Love for you to join us. If you'd like to receive an email, one email every Saturday afternoon, tell you what we're talking about, send me an email. You can send it to the Bible Forum at gmail.com. That'll give me your Gmail address and I'll put you on the list. I want to talk to you about church sexual abuse. It's not just a Catholic thing. Sexual abuse in the church runs the gamut. World Magazine reported recently saying you've no doubt heard of the Pennsylvania grand jury detailing how during a 70-year period some 300 Catholic clergy had sexually assaulted 1,000 plus victims. Well, according to a recent World Magazine cover story, Protestant clergy are also guilty of widespread sexual assault. And just as the Catholic hierarchy is done, Protestant churches as well cover up the abuse. They pass the problem along to others. So how bad is the problem? Well, according to World Magazine, in the U.S., 260 instances of child sexual abuse are reported every year to the three largest companies that insure Protestant churches and nonprofits. Out of this, three situations seem to present. Within congregations headed by pastors who have unchecked authority. You know the sort? He's the guy that started the church. He doesn't have a board, a group of people to kind of balance off what he'd like to do. He has control over the money. He has control over the property. He has control over pretty much everything. Even if there is a board, he still has control. You know the type. Secondly, by conference speakers who fly in for a day or two of teaching and assault women before flying home. Who knew? I've known a lot of guys that come in for a few days. We put them up in people's homes, and then they go home themselves. Never occurred to me any of these guys might be a little bit loose here. Of course, that was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's different today. And thirdly, within the mega churches. Mega churches where church authorities go to great lengths to keep reporters from learning about accusations of inappropriate conduct. One illustration that World Magazine offers reports that one woman attending a Christian writers conference volunteered to pick up one of the speakers at the airport and take him to his apartment. They had a friendly talk on the drive, and when the speaker invited her in to continue their talk, she didn't think anything of it. But once inside, he pinned her against the wall and began kissing her. She shoved him away, escaped, ran for her car, but he followed, jumped into the car, and tried to kiss her again. He left only when she blasted the horn. I've known 8-year-olds that do that. No adults. They also talk about youth pastors who take advantage of their positions, and if young girls complain of their behavior, church authorities often blame the girls for tempting men. Now, it is true that girls tempt men, but they don't have to do anything. It doesn't have to be overt. Young men, older boys and young men at a certain age, they just have to think about a girl. She don't have to do anything. I think the girls sometimes get a bad rap, but sometimes the girls don't know what they're doing. I think it would be helpful for parents to sit their daughters down and explain what girls do to guys. And maybe they'd step aside once in a while, stop wearing some of this junk and acting in some of these ways or playing. And they do like to play. I still remember when I was a teenager and girls would play. They would kind of get you going and then laugh at you. Thank you very much. Don't think it's changed. Some commentators, especially those outside the church, claim that if churches would just get rid of those pesky teachings that prohibit homosexual behavior, that prohibit sex outside of marriage, the abuse problem would go away. That's what 8-year-olds think. That's not what adults think. If you allow something, especially sexual, you get more of it. You don't get less. The reality here, as a National Review writer by the name of David French notes, is where's the evidence? He points to the abuse scandals emanating from Hollywood, one of the most sexually liberated places on earth. He looks at college campuses and observes as the relentless drumbeat of scandal demonstrates sexual libertinism has not created sexual utopia. Instead, it has created a ravenous culture of sexual entitlement, exploitation, and abuse. So are you surprised that sexual sin infects the church? This particular explosion of sexual behavior isn't happening in a vacuum. The Bible tells us that Satan and his minions wander the earth, looking for those they can devour, swallow up. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Why wouldn't Satan target the bride of Christ? But the question is, why is he so successful? Is it ignorance? Is it the lack of adequate protections? Is it the lack of adequate instruction? The author of this piece settles on the latter. He says we need to tell our children that abuse can happen, even within the church. We need to assure our children that we will believe them when they come to us with a story of inappropriate conduct. We must write up detailed policies on how to handle accusations, policies that call for independent investigations by those trained in handling such things. Do you see the silliness in all of that? This man has bought into the worldly, secular, politically correct methodologies. These are all the things you do after the horse is out of the barn. No one needed any of these suggestions in 1952. Why? Well, parents. And there weren't as many visual and auditory how did I lost that word? Opportunities. Parents were parents. And the people in churches, for the most part, were either Christians or they lived in a society governed by Christian values. Today, the church is no better than the world. And the reason is because the church is governed by men and women who have no spiritual knowledge of God, no spiritual understanding of Jesus, of sin, of salvation. They have parked themselves on a corner in a building, put a sign out that says we're a church, and have 150 people come in and put money in a plate. And they call it church. We don't even know who they are. We are, for the most part, playing a game. We're acting out parts. We're making it look good. I'm guessing in these churches, the ones that are being discussed here, where these illustrations pop up, the membership is not required to actually be Bible Christians. What do you think? I'm guessing in the churches where this sort of thing occurs, the pastors aren't required to actually be biblical Christians. You do know that in the Roman Catholic system, that's not a requirement. It is not a requirement that you actually be born again of the Spirit of God. It is only required that you be a good Catholic. And of course, being a good Catholic means you're Christian. But there's not a single Bible verse to support that. Not one. If you think that pastors are Christian just because they're pastors, you haven't been listening to me. I've been beating this drum for the last 20 years. I've been telling you about this. Illustration after illustration, story after story, fact upon fact. The popular forms of church are little more than any other club, any other organization that you might want to join. And the requirements for those clubs are often more stringent than our membership in our churches. Why is that? Well, because we simply want you to come. Do you really think the 30,000 people who come to hear Joel Osteen are members of that church? Do you really think the mega churches in general require members to actually have a credible testimony of salvation in the Lord Jesus Christ and be demonstrating it? The result is the churches are no more safe than that of our schools. Perhaps less so, because we're more trusting. We think it's okay. They're going to church. They're going to be in a Sunday school class. They're going to youth group. They're all going to go off together somewhere. And I know the couple that runs it, so they're fine. If that couple is not born again of the Spirit of God, they're not fine. Their heart is still desperately wicked beyond anything you can know. That's the Bible definition. They may be decent people. They don't have the internal control mechanism. And there is no telling what anybody's liable to do, given whatever the circumstance might be. I'm not talking about abusing your kids, but they might not teach them the things that you would want them taught, or they may teach things you don't want taught. You don't know. And the illustration of their marital bliss, it's going to rub off on these kids one way or another. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. And we've just thrown everything out and said, well, it doesn't really matter. Apparently it does. Read the newspaper. Watch the news. It matters.